My name is Lifang. I'm from China, but now live in Singapore.
Hi, I'm Hui. I'm also from China and have been living in Amsterdam, the Netherlands since 2019.
Today, me and Hui, we are going to talk about the dating difference between China and the West. So, when the first time when I go to US, which is 2009, I got so shocked about the dating culture over there because it was very, very different from mine when I grown up.
Yeah, felt the same, although I'm not in the US, but actually in Europe, the dating culture is really different from China as well. And a lot of friends of mine, they are quite interested in how it is in China. So what I thought, yeah, we could just tell people how it is in China and what we think the differences between in China and the West. So that's what you're gonna hear in today's episode.
Hui, do you remember when we grown up? I think the Chinese dating culture is very, I would say, conservative. So I only remember the very simple model. So everyone start from being friend, which means you can do maybe watch a movie, go out to have dinner, but you won't hold hands, you won't kiss until you commit with each other. Then you start to do what we will see as dating in the Western culture.
Yeah, that's true. I would say one of the things that separates dating in China and dating in the West is one, do you define the relationship? Like, for example, like in China, like you said, you will do things as if you were just normal friend, and then you would define what this is, and if it's a relationship or if it's not a relationship. But on the other hand, like in the West, you do things as a friend maybe in the beginning, and then you started to do things as in China, you would only do if you are identified as a couple. But here it's actually not. You will just do things as if you're a couple without defining the relationship. And after this stage, you would come to the stage where you pop up the question like, what is this?
Yeah. So actually, I'm quite curious because when I first go to the US, I there's a saying that if you guys haven't kissed within the first 3 days, there's never going to happen. So do you heard the same thing in Netherlands as well?
Not exactly the same, but I would say it's definitely as very similar. Because if you don't kiss, which means that there isn't a sexual attraction, and the sexual attraction in a relationship is so important. So that kind of like means, yeah, I don't think it's gonna work out. Something like that. Imagine if you are gonna be with someone that you don't even want to kiss. I don't think that's a good sign. Yeah, but on the other hand, in China, this is I guess like maybe now it's completely different. It's especially in the big cities, it's more prone to the Western culture. But traditionally speaking, I would say, yeah, you don't kiss in on the first date, or yeah, or even before the third date, you don't do that.
Yeah, I was when I first started dating in the US, I got quite freaked out because of that. So say if I already date a guy for twice and then I start to worry about, oh my God, will he kiss me in the third date? Because there was this saying, I don't want to kiss anyone before we become boyfriend and girlfriend. So I keep having this anxious feeling because of our culture is like so different.
Yeah, but I hope like at this moment you've already got what it means.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, the in the third date, he asked to kiss me, and I refused. So yeah, sorry to the guy, but I think this is quite against where I grown up. But I think for today in China, the culture is quite kind of a mix of feeling. For example, I have a friend. She also studied in the U.S. and she date a Chinese guy who has never studied abroad. So they two have very different opinion about dating. So I think she strictly follow the US way, which is dating and then exclusive dating and then commitment. I think that's the process. And I think she tries to explain this to the guy. He does not understand.
And what did the guy say?
I think he is more towards the traditional Chinese way. So we're just like friend. I want to pursue you, so I treat you dinner, I bring you to movies. We won't do anything before we become boyfriend and girlfriend. And that's it. And also when a guy is trying to pursue a girl, but also seeing another girl at the same time, we totally see this type of guy bad person, to be honest.
Yeah, the guy full of red flags. Yeah, that's actually makes me. Yeah, that's true. That's true because I haven't dated a guy from China for a very long time. I forget how it is. Yeah, the sequencing is very different. But I really think now in Beijing, Shanghai, these big cities, it's the same maybe. Or obviously not everyone follows the, let's say, the Western rule of dating, but I would say the youngsters are quite open-minded about where, like, when you're gonna kiss and when you're gonna have sex. It's not like by the book.
Oh, other than that, there are other differences. So one thing I can think about is really, is it okay to date multiple person at the same time? I think traditionally in the Chinese culture, when a guy pursue a girl, we believe the guy will only date this girl. So we don't have this thing you date multiple person at the same time. So if you date multiple persons at a time, people will definitely see you as a bad person.
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah, this is also one of the big differences, I would say, at least in Amsterdam. So here, what I experience is like we do meet multiple people actually. Like we go on different dates with different people. Really, like sometimes I feel we go on a date in the same evening, but with two people.
Oh, so because I now feel the dating life is a little bit complicated in China now. So say if I live in big city like in Beijing, people come from different cities, different education background. Someone if they have studied abroad, they believe in that date, exclusive date, commitment route. But people who have never studied abroad, they're more traditional. So when we start to date, I have to think about, oh, what is the perception of dating in that person's eyes? So do you see the same thing when you date in Netherlands or Amsterdam?
I would say not really because Amsterdam is super international, and I think like people, no matter where they are from, they adapt to this international culture, an international and slash Dutch culture. So not really. But if I really think about, let's say, the criteria of the date that I'm gonna go on, I would actually think about what the other person does, these type of things, like how good their English is. That's actually one of the things you date as an expat. Like language, it is quite important because first of all, I don't speak Dutch and I would not expect anyone to speak Chinese. So if I go on a date, 100% it's actually in English, and I would evaluate the other person's English level. Not to say that if their English is good or not, but it's more can we actually communicate fluently in English to express what we think? I think, at least for me, communication is really important. If you can't understand each other, then it's going to be very hard.
Okay, yeah, I get it. But I think in China we don't have this issue because everybody speak Mandarin. I think the one thing that is similar to this could be people come from different province. So China is too big, and then each province might have slightly different culture about dating and marriage. So I do heard a lot of stories about people married to another province, and there are culture conflicts quite a lot, quite
Yeah,
a lot.
yeah,
Yeah,
fun. I've only dated the guys in Beijing. Also, I'm from the north, so I haven't really dated anyone from the south.
yeah, I think if you talk about get married, it will be a lot more complicated. There's no like universal rules for everybody to follow. Everyone from different province or like they're from different cultures. It's quite complicated. But I think if Chinese marry people from other countries, the process will be a lot simplified. But if two-person from different province in China, it's possible that they encounter some culture difference. culture shock even within China.
Yeah, I think so as well. Yeah, for the listeners, so actually, in China, people from the north and the people from the south, like culture wise, we actually have quite a lot of differences. So sometimes that's why we say people from the north and people from the south, although all Chinese, are sometimes don't get each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So we North people usually complains about South people because they're different. But in my college, I have roommates from Southern province. I also heard their complaints about North people, which is quite interesting. So one day I remembered I was having brunch with my friend in a very fancy place in Beijing, and the table next to us, I think it was a girl from South, and she was like literally talking about, I will never be able to get well with those people from North. I was like, what? Why do you steal our words? I think North people always say this.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's not just in China, like in every country, people from the north, from the south, even from the east, from the west, maybe a little bit less, but people from the north, from the south, they are really like different. Like in Spain, in Italy, in the Netherlands, it's all the same. Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
So in terms of this part, I think China is indifferent with the other countries. We're also the same.
Yeah, we finally find a commonality.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So yeah, so regardless the different culture shock within China, something that's very common in China is what we call, when you're talking about dating and marriage, you usually get a pressure from the parents.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I'm that's definitely true.
I think this thing does not exist in other countries. It seems like only in China. So for example, if women, specifically women after 30 years old, then the parents will give a lot of pressure to force her to find a guy to get married.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say this doesn't exist outside China. I think there's a big difference between the culture in in urban cities and cultures in villages. Actually, like I heard from my friends who are not from China, they actually get some pressure from their parents to get married or having kids.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought in Western culture, in other countries, there's no such kind of pressure from parents.
I'm sure they exist, but maybe like the level might be not that extreme because I did hear some really extreme cases in China. Like I remember one of my friend told me she saw a video. I think it's a father. The family lives in the village, and the father threats to kill himself if his daughter doesn't get married.
Wow.
Yeah, I think this is like horrific. This is really horrific. And
Wow.
yeah, sometimes I feel like, what sort of parents are these?
I think this is a very extreme case. I've heard a lot of a story that is less serious than this, but still very bad. So, for example, during the Chinese New Year, everyone's supposed to go back to home for a family reunion, and then that's the best timing for the entire big family keep giving pressure to this person to get married, regardless this one is seeing someone or not. It's just incredible. Then I think a lot of people just scared of going back home to meet the big family. Then I think sometimes some people actually choose to travel during the Chinese New Year period just to avoid this.
Yeah, that's true. So for the listeners, like in China, we have this Spring Festival, which is a little bit like Christmas. That's a time where your families get together and you go to your relatives, these type of things. So in some families, this is the best scenario for the parents and their relatives to poke this question, like when are you going to get married? When are you going to have kids? All these kind of pressured questions to you, which is yeah. And I'm wondering, like, what do you think why parents keep asking their kids to get married in China?
I think one thing I don't understand is because I think all parents should wish their child to live a happy life, right? But this kind of thing is against that goal. So I always been very confused why this is happening. So one of my assumption is really I think the boundary between parents and child are not very clear. I think a lot of the Chinese parents believe that their children belongs to them and they have the right to control them. So we often see, I think traditionally Chinese kids live with their parents even when they get married. It's always the big family, and you should always listen to your parents the entire life. I think that's where it comes from. The parents feel like, oh, I can control your life. I can say something to that. That's why they will give this pressure to their child because they believe their child should listen to them. What do you think?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on this. I think for many parents, especially those extreme ones, they think their kids are an extension of themselves. They don't really see kids as independent human beings. They think their kids know nothing. They think their kids are stupid. And that's why they feel like they have all the right to tell what their kids should do, and they would only tell what their kids should do based on what they know. And many of these parents, they are actually not educated, not open-minded, and majority of the, let's say, understanding of life from their peers who have never left the village. I wouldn't say like they know a lot. And now with the social media, they actually also use social media, but they only consume relatively cheap quality knowledge. So that's make it even worse. So that's what I think. I really think the boundary issue in Chinese family system is such a big problem.
Yeah, I agree. There is a very interesting question I want to ask. So, for any of your foreign friend or people from other countries, if they tell their parents, I want to marry this person, and parents does not like this person, what will happen?
I think it really depends. One of my friends told me that her parents won't intervene if the guy that she dated or she wants to get married, it's not someone they would like they
They like or they approve?
yeah. So I really think it depending on your parents as well. So some parents might be a little bit more strict with that, but I think like majority of the parents are relatively fine because you are not marrying, like it's your kids getting married. It's not like that you are getting married with a guy or with a girl.
Yeah, but will this person listen to parents' opinion? So say if the parents doesn't like your girlfriend or boyfriend, will you just leave and end the relationship?
I think no, of course I'm speaking on behalf of myself. I just think, okay, if they don't like the person that I'm dating, they have to give me a very solid reason why. And then maybe I will consider. Maybe there are things I ignore and couldn't see because I'm so in love. But if they just say, no, I don't like him without any reasons, then I think this is absurd. Of course, I'm not going to listen.
Yeah, I'm only asking these questions because I think for the cases in China, parents actually affect the relationship quite a lot. I've often hear stories about, okay, my parents does not like my girlfriend or boyfriend, so we have to break up. We cannot get married. I think the parents usually gave solid reason because he does not have a house, he does not have a good job. But I think it's very difficult for any Chinese child that does not listen to their parents' opinion about when looking for a spouse. So we have this saying, if you are going to date someone that your parents don't like, is going to be really hard.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I'd agree. That reminds me of the story that I actually heard from my parents. So this guy, like his parents live underneath my parents, and the guy has been dating this girl for, I think, like almost 2 years, and at the end of that 2 years they wanted to get married, and I think like they already set almost everything up, but since the beginning the guy's parents have never liked the girl, and they don't like the girl because they think the girl is not hardworking enough or something like that. I forgot the exact reasons, but they thought their son is like they never thought that they're really gonna get serious. So that's why in the end, when his son told them like they are really gonna get married, and they really intervened, they stopped everything. So they told their kids like, no, you are not gonna marry this girl, we forbid. And then in the end they didn't get married.
Just because the parents
Yeah.
against the marriage.
Yeah, and it's only because the parents didn't approve. They didn't like the girl enough. And that's what happened. And the girl's father came to the guy's parents and asking for money, because he said, your kid has led on my daughter for 2 years, and now she doesn't have any value. Now it's gonna be very hard for her to get married. So we need to be compensated. And then
Really?
the
Is
guy, and then
really?
yeah, yeah, really. And then
Wow.
the guy's parents give them like, I don't know, like maybe 10,000 yuan or something like that. I mean, this is like really absurd, but I'm sure it happens. But
Really?
yeah,
I cannot believe this. I didn't know the later part of the story
yeah,
about the money thing.
yeah. Thank.
Okay. Yes. So you see, it's very interesting that at the end of the day, it's not the couple they talk to each other, it's their parents talk to each other. That's why I think many people already know that in China, in some of the park, there are actually parents looking for partners for their child, which is ridiculous. Their child are not even there. It's only parents and parents looking for help their child, but the child themselves are not there. So this is such a reflection of that culture.
Yeah, we have a saying: you are not marrying the person, you are marrying the whole family.
Yes, exactly. And I think this is very common, not even in China. I think in Korea and in Singapore also share the same culture.
Yeah, because our whole culture is very family oriented. But on one hand, I do feel there are some perks, but it also makes things super muddy.
Oh yeah, yeah. Now I realize more that how this dating thing immersed with our culture so much.
Yeah, I think like the dating culture and also like marriage is a reflection of the culture that we live in.
Sure. And another reason I can think about is actually it's so hard for us to be different from the others. So I think from our parents' generation, everybody get married. So that's why we should get married. If some other friends, if our parents' friends' child get married, we should also get married. So being different is like a sin in our society. I think that's one of the driver for this pressure to get married thing from the parents.
Yeah, this is also like cultural influence. So we've grown up in an environment where you have to be the same. So when you are 30 years old, and being the same means that you should get married. And if you're not, then you are the outliner, and you will try everything not to be the outliner. Actually, I think it's your parents. It's more that your parents don't want to be the outliner among their friends. So that's why they.
Oh, yes, exactly. Because I heard some story, the parents saying that if you don't get married, I'll be so ashamed in front of my friend.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. It's never about the kids themselves. It's about the parents. That's why it goes back to the boundary issue. Like the parents don't see the kids as independent human beings. They say it's their extension.
Wow. I didn't realize. Now I totally see this.
Yeah, yeah. When it comes to family, there are so many dramas.
So another thing I can actually think about is I think we really have a very big generation gap with our parents. So recently, I realized that China has been developed within 20 years. There are so many changes, And our parents live in the old China and we live in the new China. So our ideas are very different. Maybe that's why they give us so much pressure. I think for younger Chinese generation, we're totally fine about singles. We accept each other, but our parents is like everyone get married and you just have to do.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. That's really a good point. I think for our parents, that generation, they only know how to live life one way. Like they would never think you could, especially for female, I would say, like they can't live a life being single. But in our generation, the way that we see it is completely different from how our parents see it. So yeah, I think that's definitely one of the reasons why we get this strong pressure from parents to get married.
Yeah, I think for a lot of Chinese parents, after they retire, they don't have much to do. I don't think they have these other life goals other than taking care of the grandchild.
Yeah, that's true. I think they are waiting for their project to kick off, but the project will never start, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
really hope all the Chinese parents really find their own purpose of life other than taking care of the child, taking care of the grandchild, and forever.
Yeah. But I think when we get older, it will be a completely different story. But for our parents, I think majority of them still are waiting for the grandkids to be delivered.
Yes. In terms of the perception gap, I actually have a very interesting case. So I remembered when I was in high school, divorce is such a big thing. So if one of my classmates, the parents get divorced, the entire class will know, and it would be a big news. And it was in my high school, and my younger brother is 8 years younger than me, and I happen to have a lot of talks with his friends. So it's so interesting that I think in his generation, which we don't have a huge age gap, I think 8 years is all right, over 50% of his parents are actually divorced, and everyone just see parents divorce as such a normal thing. No one care about it. No one will look at you in other eyes. But when I was in high school, it was like a totally big news.
Yeah, indeed. I think this also coincides with how fast the Chinese society has changed in the past 20 or 30 years. Indeed, I remember like when I was younger, if someone's parents got divorced, it's really a big news. And like people really look at the kids in different, like in
Different eyes.
yeah, poor kids got so traumatized. But
Yes, a lot of gossip behind.
yeah, exactly. And they would feel very pity about the kids.
Yes, yes, exactly. But although divorce now become very common thing in China, but if you are divorced, specifically you are a woman and you divorced, in the dating market, you will be devalued, to be honest, which is one part I don't like about the Chinese dating culture.
Yeah, that's true. I guess to some extent, on the surface, people think like divorce is so common, it's nothing. I think subconsciously they still devalue.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess that also adds on the pressure to women specifically. But on the other hand, for guys, actually a divorce doesn't really bring a lot of trouble, except maybe if the guy has a kid, then it makes it a bit tricky. But if the guy just divorced, as if it's nothing. But if a woman is divorced, then there are so many questions.
But it reverts back to the topic about the parents' pressure. I've heard this saying, the parents say, I'd rather you get divorced in the future than not get married at all.
Why?
I just don't know. It doesn't make sense. If the goal should be happily live together for a long time, not just get married itself. But I think that's how Chinese parents now seeing this entire stuff. That's why there are so many conflicts between the two generations.
Yeah, like dating and getting married in China is always a big topic. It is a thing that carries culture, carries family, carries almost everything. Yeah, no wonder a lot of people even get depressed thinking about. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so today we talked about how dating is different in China compared with dating in the West. We also touched upon the pressure to get married in China, and I hope you enjoyed our conversation. And if you have any questions about this, or if you heard any stories and you want to know if it's true or not, feel free to share with us. And in our next episode, we're going to talk more about the Chinese culture. So stay tuned. Bye.